number 5 is that you access the hips. As I've mentioned before with that lift in the gym, when we're doing a deadlift, we need to be able to hinge from the hips. And it's very important to hinge from the hips, as of everything I've described, because we need to maintain this neutral spine to maintain sort of optimal health of the spine and minimize any risk of injury to it. So if we are going to lift weights from the floor, we need to be able to get down to the floor with our hips and secondary with our knees. So we need to get primary movement from the hips. And the reason we do that, again, if we build out with the anatomy, we've got ball and socket joints either side of the hip with the femur joins into. These are called freely movable joints. The joints of the spine are called slightly movable. So we can start to even see, just by the label that they've been given, that movement should be occurring at the hip. So we've got these ball and socket joints, we've got huge range of movement, or they should have huge range of movement, and what they've also got are big powerful muscles around them, in so much as the glutes. So when we flex, we go back into the hips, and then when we extend, we access the glute muscles to be able to lift the weight. And again, they are much more bigger and much more powerful than erector spinae muscles. So we need to be able to access the hips when we're lifting, when we're carrying, when we're pushing, when we're pulling, when we're getting up, when we're rotating. So all these different movements need to come from the hip. And then the spine needs to be in its position so it can transfer that load or transfer that force to wherever it needs to go. I.e., if it's a lift, it's back down through the floor or through the legs, through the feet and into the floor. It needs to be able to manage any weak links. So we need to maintain that position of the neutral spine so we don't have those weak links, which are going to be energy leaks. And if it's a more sporting performance, which requires the use of the arms, for example, a golf swing, a boxer's punch, or a tennis swing, that force needs to be generated in the hips, transferred through the core, down the arm, into the racket or club or fist or whatever it may be, to then be able to produce the shot that they want to produce. But all of that requires this neutral spine. Now, there are some caveats to that. So, stick questions down in the comment section below if you want. But there are caveats to that, and the spine can move in those scenarios, but it has to be done in a specific way. And the core muscles need to be tuned to minimize any stress to the spine. So it's not just a case of, which I'm going to talk about in this sort of the next sort of bonus section, where I'm going to talk about some of the possible controversies. But essentially, we need to access the hips to be able to get optimal movement when we lift, carry, push, pull, rotate, get up, whatever it may be. Maintain the neutral spine to do it. If you can't maintain the neutral spine, lift the weight up so you can maintain the neutral spine. Access the hips long term. Open out the hips so you can lift the weight from the floor. Don't go short term and think flexed is going to be all right, because eventually long term that will turn into a problem. So number 5 is you access the hips.